Hello there, my name is Sergeant First Class Kristina Manookin. I'm currently serving as an Equal Opportunity Advisor in the United States Army, and today I'm going to be giving a class that I put together. This is not Army mandated or created class on in-service gender transition for transgender service members, focusing mainly on Army doctrine and Army policy that I have read. Okay, and I resource that and cite that at the end of this presentation. Okay. Once again, this is a class that I created in order to make sure that I can educate my units, my command teams, and my soldiers to make sure that they can help out their soldiers as much as possible if they do have a trans service member that comes in. And also just to better prepare themselves as non-commissioned officers, and as leaders in general, and also just as teammates. Okay? Okay, so as I said, I am Sergeant First Class Kristina Manookin. I currently serve in Korea. I'm not going to put out my unit, I'm sure you can find me, but I'm not here to speak on behalf of my unit, so I will keep that to myself at this time. But I'm currently serving in Korea as an Equal Opportunity Advisor, and I am a transgender woman. We're going to go over some definitions today, and also the gender transition process, gender transition key points, as well as key points that I put out to commanders and leaders, and transgender service changes based off the new guidance that was recently published on March 12th, 2019, and became effective on April 12th, okay? Otherwise known as the trans ban, which is not the official name. We're going to go over some frequently asked questions that I have been asked personally, recommendations that I give, and then I'll, of course, cite my resources. And normally I do this in person, so that's why questions are on there, and I try to have questions throughout to create a dialogue back and forth. But if you do have questions, please put them down below, and I'll be more than happy to either make a follow-up video if there's enough questions, or to answer them in the chat window below. Okay? All right, moving on. So go to some definitions. Gender identity. That's a person's how they feel of who they are inside. Okay, that's how you see yourself, and how you feel who you are. Okay, natal gender is your gender assigned at birth. That's when you come out and the doctor says it's a XYZ. Okay, cisgender is someone who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. Okay, cis actually. I believe it's a Latin word. I could be horribly wrong on that one. But I know cis, when I looked that up, it actually means on the same side of. So their gender identity is on the same side as the gender assigned at birth. Hence, cisgender. It's also not a new word either. Okay? And of course, transgender. Transgender is like myself, someone who is born one gender, or born one physical sex, and identifies another way. So we have transgender man. It's someone who was assigned female at birth, AFAB, but identifies as male. Transgender woman, like myself, is someone who is assigned male at birth, but I identify as female. Okay. And then of course we have the diagnosis itself of gender dysphoria. This is out of the DSM-5. Now it states a marked incongruence between one's experience and expressed gender and assigned gender by at least 6 months, associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of function. Okay. That's how the military, or that's how the DSM-5, not military, DSM-5 categorizes that. So this isn't someone who wants to suddenly just identify as something else, either to mock the trans community, like, look, before I do this exercise, I'm going to identify as female so I can get a higher score. Okay. There's been mocking people who put things like that out, and that's not okay, and that doesn't even follow into the guidelines whatsoever. During this video also, we'll not be getting into any politics or anything like that. Okay. All right, gender transition. That's just the time that a person transitions from their gender assigned at birth to their gender identity, which it can include many, many things. Learning to live socially, learning to carry yourself, and learning how to finding that most comfortable gender role and expression, of course, and it could also include feminization, masculinization through hormones and or surgeries or medical procedures, right? many things involved in this, and it's variable, individualized. Everybody's transition is different. The time of transition, everything, okay? It's very individualized. So the gender transition process. Now this process for gender transition, this is specifically going on guidance for the Army, okay? So I can't talk about civilian side stuff necessarily. I know what I've had to do on the civilian side that's helped, but I'm focusing this one on Army transition process, or the process that I went through, okay? So first you have to get that diagnosis of gender dysphoria, right? Now, I wouldn't necessarily go get one immediately, as with the new changes that we'll get into later on, you'll understand why, okay? But that is diagnosed by a military provider, or it is diagnosed by a civilian person, but is verified and recognized by a military provider. So the military still has to look at it, recognize it, and accept it, okay? That diagnosis. That diagnosis, getting the diagnosis can take anywhere from 3 months to a year, okay? Because that's based on that relationship between that behavioral provider and their client, their patient, right? Now, once you have that diagnosis, then you can start getting that treatment plan created. So my treatment plan was made in Fort Sill at the Reynolds Hospital by the transgender team there. At that point, that treatment plan is sent to the brigade commander for signatures. Now that brigade commander has that signature authority on this, which means if this transition process doesn't fit within a timeline we have, such as like if we have a deployment coming up, then that brigade commander can opt to postpone the transition until returning from that deployment. Or if we're currently deployed, they can postpone it until we get back. Okay, so it doesn't interfere with military mission, because readiness is the first thing, military readiness. But this is very easy to control, and it can be modified based on the brigade commander. So this isn't like someone just goes and everyone has to follow suit to the transit individual. That's not the way it works. Okay? Now, once that treatment plan is created and signed, at that point you can start being issued cross-sex hormone therapy. That's taking your hormones, which creates a 6-month non-deployability status. Several medical communities have said that even that time is not necessary. Me, when I had my 6-month non-deployability time, I had already gotten back from Korea at that time, and so I wasn't deployable, wasn't going nowhere. I combined that with getting eye surgery, and so that's a 3-month non-deployability. But I still went to the field, I still went and went to the range and shot my assigned weapon, qualified. I still went and shot rockets. I still did everything that I needed to do to accomplish the mission at the time. There was nothing that taking hormones stood in the way of, and nothing that even came close to getting in the way of really anything, okay? Now, during this time, this 6-month non-deployability time, that's when it's time to gather documentation for this gender marker change. So the documentation that's required for that is first the treatment plan, which we just went over, and then of course you'll need a doctor's letter of in-process transition and completion, okay, / completion. So you can actually get that in-process of transition letter. I went on to the actual federal passport website, and they have the document that you need verbatim. That's what you want to get first off, written verbatim for in-process transition. And we'll get into why in just a moment here. Okay? But once you have these letters, as well as another doctor letter that states you are stable on your hormones, specifically stable on hormones in your gender that you're changing to, then you can actually get the brigade commander's endorsement for the change. And that gets submitted through the company commander. Company commander sends it to the battalion commander to the brigade commander. It gets reviewed by a legal, of course, and it gets reviewed by the SCCC, which we'll get into who they are later on as well. At that point, when everything's all good and checked off and blessed off on by all the parties, then the brigade commander will sign off on it, and you can change that gender marker. Now, here at the bottom it says U.S. passport. Now, I specifically add U.S. passport because that is the easiest one to get, but you need some sort of federal documentation with the new gender on it. Okay, it could be a birth certificate, it could be a court order, it could be something like that, but it needs to be some sort of federal thing. Passport was the easiest one to get. It's pretty simple. If you have the in process of transition letter signed by that doctor, done by the passport, Federal Passport Administration's website, then that is all you need to take down there to apply for the new passport and a new picture, and they sent it. And so I got that new passport back. I expedited, paid a little extra money to expedite it, and I got that back within about 10 days. So it was really, really quick for me. Now, it doesn't say it's going to come within 10 days. It can take up to, I think this is 3 weeks, but it was really quick getting that done. There wasn't really any problems because I followed everything verbatim as it says in the Federal Passport website. Okay? It's very important to follow their guidelines posted there for that passport, all right? And then, of course, you need a name change documentation if that's applicable, if you choose to change your name. I had my name changed pretty early so that it would be ready when it was time to change my gender marker. That part was already taken care of. I wasn't trying to hit 2 things at the same time. Okay. So once you have that gender stability and gender marker change, then at that time your gender marker will change in DEAR's Defense Eligibility Enrollment Reporting System, and that's when you can start living in your preferred gender. And the military will recognize you as that. As the Army recognizes me as a female, I have changed my gender marker in DEARS. Okay. Now this is actually straight out of, clipped out of the transgender handbook that was published by the Department of Defense. All right, and this goes over a lot of things that I've talked about there. So notification of the commander, get the diagnosis, to confirm the diagnosis, initiate medical treatment plan. Now I know this says ETPs on the ETPs that's referring to exceptions to policy. Now you can submit an exception to policy to live and use facilities in the gender opposite your gender marker in DEARS, but the Army has not approved any of them, period. So you can submit it. If you're Army, there's not a high chance it would get approved. I know the Navy and the Air Force, they're good at approving those things, but the Army has yet not approved any of them. So submit at your own risk. I didn't bother because I didn't believe it would get done anyway. Why would I be exception for that one? But once your gender marker is changed in DEARS, as it says there, then your preferred gender standards apply to your new gender, to the gender marker in DEARS. For uniform, grooming, building, showers, restrooms, height, weight, physical fitness, pronouns, all those things. And that's when your gender transition process for the Army is considered complete. That doesn't mean complete as in you can't have any more services. You're still eligible for many things. That just means you'll start to be able to live as your true self. Okay? So key points for gender transition. Every transition is different. Now the Army has very specific things that you're going to do. You're going to take hormones. You're going to continue using hormones. It's part of it for the Army, and that's so. I think they made that so there's no advantage thing. You can't be try to transition and take a PT test to try to make things easier and not take hormones. You're going to take hormones in the Army. Okay? But some individuals prefer that very few people know that they're transgender and hope that after transition they can quietly blend in. Now that's called passing. Now a lot of the trans individuals, that's the goal. The goal is to pass. The goal is for like me to walk down the street, for me to walk down the street, and then people do not recognize anything about my previous gender. That they just see me as the female, the woman I am. To me, that's not the goal for me personally. Mainly because I don't think I'll ever pass. And I accept that. I mean, if I do one day, cool, that'd be awesome. But I don't think that's gonna be the case for me. So that's not my goal. And that moves on to the next section there, which is some are committed to educating the public about gender identity, and answer questions and give classes and talk openly and all these things. That's me. Do I prefer to? No, I actually don't. No, I don't prefer that. But being that I don't feel I pass very well anyways, and being the fact that I'm a sergeant first class, so I'm senior non-commissioned officer, also being an equal opportunity advisor in the Army, then I feel it's my role and my duty to kind of essentially be the target. So if I can, I have the rank to be able to take care of myself. That some other junior soldiers may not have, and so I will take the brunt of those questions, and I want them, and I tell my command teams here specifically, I want you to ask me the questions that you're not sure are appropriate or not. I want you to ask me those offensive questions, because then I can tell you that's offensive and don't do it. I can help you better take care of your soldiers and have that dignity and respect permeate your entire organization, so there isn't any problems or issues. So that's what I make sure I do. I make sure that I'm public, I'm out, I'm about, I'm making these videos, which to me is super awkward. You can tell. But that's why I make these videos. That's why I do these things, so I can help educate others. Okay? Revealing gender identity for some people at work, and maybe one of the very last steps that they do. They might try to stay as private about the entire situation for as long as possible, because it can be mentally trying. I've cried in a few commanders' offices concerning my transition, especially when starting out. It can be very, very scary. Letting someone know that much about you, and the fact that you don't, if you want to be able to live as yourself, you don't have a choice. You have to expose yourself, at least to a certain extent, and that is to commanders, in order to process that transition, to doctors and things like that. That you need to let them know who you are, and it's honestly, it's pretty terrifying. You don't know how they're going to react. You don't know how anyone's going to react. So that might be the last thing a lot of people do, especially with the fear of violence too, unfortunately. Which goes on the next part, it is important not to out somebody. Okay, you shouldn't out anybody, any members of the LGBT community, okay? But you should not, definitely don't out a transgender service member. Right? In the Army, sexual orientation is protected. It's one of the 6 bases of discrimination. It's protected. Transgender is not. I know it says gender identity is protected there, but the fact that the trans ban is possible proves that we are not protected. So don't out somebody, especially if they don't have a diagnosis. Don't out anybody. Don't be disrespectful. All right, so exceptions to policy. I talked about that a little bit earlier. The approval authority is withheld to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for ATPs in relation to a soldier's gender transition. And as I said, and that's according to Army Directive 2016-35. And as I said, they have not approved any as of yet, and I don't foresee them doing so, as this has been going on for several years. They have many chances to approve it, and they haven't, and I don't think they will. Now, prior to and after gender marker change, okay, these things that you can talk about with the soldier while they're transitioning. Talk about APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test, or now going to the ACFT. Talk about grooming standards and billeting and latrines and UAs and all these things. These are things you can start looking into. And in that transgender handbook from the DOD that has so many things that are so vital for a commander to know. There is so much information a commander has, and so much power a commander has in order to help everyone's comfort, not just the trans soldier, but the other soldiers as well, so that everyone can be taken care of and everyone can live with dignity and respect. Just respect each other. Right? Now, the Army Service Central Coordination Cell was established by the Assistant Secretary of the Army to assist and advise commanders to address their inquiries. So that's another place that the packets and stuff get sent to, not just legal, for them to say, yes, this falls in with the guidelines, this falls in with the published doctrine for transition. So that's where all my stuff went to as well. And that's also a source for commanders to reach out to ask questions. Right? And of course, mission readiness always comes first. It's like I said, that brigade commander has a lot of say in when this transition plan starts taking place and all these things. That timeline, it's essentially on that commander, right? So to make sure it does not interfere with mission readiness or with the deployments or any missions. So the trans service changes, that is based off the DTM 19004 that was published on March 12th and became effective on April 12th, 2019. Bottom line up front, transgender service members, we're here. We're not going anywhere. There are many of us, especially once this guidance came out, that people need to have that diagnosis prior to April 12th. Many of my brothers, my trans brothers and sisters went out and got their diagnosis. So there's people of all ranks and all military occupational specialties, MOSs, in the military, in the Army, that we're here and we're continuing to serve, all right? And we still serve under the 2016 policy. So the new guidance doesn't suddenly mean that all trans service members are getting kicked out. There is very specific guidelines to that, and we'll get into that here further as we talk about exempt individuals, in-service transition, appointment, enlistment, or induction to the military services, and separation. So exempt individuals. To read through all this, I'm not going to just read out there. That's not the way I like to do presentation. But essentially what this means is if you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria prior to April 12th, 2019, you are grandfathered into the 2016 Carter policy. Now, under that policy, you're still eligible for surgeries, for hormones, for all these things, for gender marker change in DEERS. You're still eligible for all of this stuff. Okay, that's what that means. Now, what that also means is if you receive a diagnosis after that April 12th date, then you are subject to separation from the military, and you are not considered exempt. As it says there, individuals who are not exempt must adhere to, like all service members, the standards associated with their biological sex. So, appointment, enlistment, or induction, ascensions for the military. Now, this includes not just joining the military, but also ascensions can include going from enlisted to officer, and that's one question that was posed. My understanding is that when you go from enlisted to officer, then you're out for a day, and so that might be a time. I've got mixed answers on that one, but it might be a time where, since you're officially out of the Army for that day, that you would no longer fall under the grandfather policy. I've also heard that you would fall under, so I don't have clear guidance on that one. My fear is that it'll be picking and choosing, and they won't be protected. Okay. Now, some of the things to note on this one, for an applicant to be able to join the military, they must demonstrate 36 consecutive months, so 3 years, of stability in their biological sex. Essentially, that means don't have gender dysphoria. Right? It's ridiculous. If I could live for 3 years comfortable in myself, before transitioning, I wouldn't have had to come to this in the first place. So it's ridiculous. But having 3 years of that, so the applicant demonstrates that the applicant has not transitioned to his or her preferred gender, and a licensed medical provider has determined the gender transition is not medically necessary. Once again, that all says hasn't transitioned and doesn't have gender dysphoria. Right? As that goes with that marked incongruence and those issues that are labeled out in the DSM-5, which makes it medically necessary to transition. It's a real diagnosis with a real treatment plan. So, and of course, a history of cross-sex hormone therapy and a history of sex reassignment or gender reconstruction surgery is qualifying. So, if you've taken hormones for transition or have SRS, doesn't matter how far it was away, you can't join. It's that simple. Separation. Service members who are not exempt. Now, I've seen a lot of things where they focus on this first line here, which is may not be separated solely based on diagnosis of gender dysphoria. But if you keep reading further, it says without first being medically evaluated for possible referral to the disability evaluation system. It just means that you can't be based on just dysphoria without first being looked at by a doctor. So yes, you can. And if referral to the DES is not appropriate in accordance with the DOD 1332.18, they may be subject for processing for administrative separation. Service members with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, it says all these fancy words, but if you get your diagnosis after April 12th, you're getting kicked out. That's essentially what that means. They fancy it up in many things, but you'll get kicked out if you can't adhere to your biological sex. Other than there, you get the diagnosis afterwards. You be looked at by a medical doctor and processed out. So frequently asked questions, one that I have gotten, okay, is being transgender the same as being a transvestite or a crossdresser? The answer is no, as you can see on the screen. Okay, transvestite is an outdated term that can be considered derogatory, all right? I am not a transvestite. Crossdresser is a person who wears clothing of the opposite sex for reasons other than gender identity. A transgender person who dresses according to their gender is not cross-dressing, like myself. I am not cross-dressing right now. I am a woman and I'm wearing what I consider female clothes. I think gender clothes is stupid and ridiculous anyways. They're clothes, but whatever. Some transgender people participate in drag events. I've done drag, right? It's not the same as day-to-day attire. And you have cisgender people who are straight or gay or trans that like to do drag. That is not the same as being transgender, all right? Or dressing according to the gender marker. Drag is a performance. Transgender is who I am, just who I am, right? So other derogatory terms may include he, she, shim, shemale, ladyboy, tranny. There's some more. They're not appropriate. Don't say them. Just don't be a jerk. Essentially, that's what it means. Don't be a jerk, please. How do I address a transgender soldier? How do I know what pronouns to use? And this, I love this question. It's a phenomenal question. It's a great question. This question tells me that someone wants to be respectful because they're not sure how and they don't want to be disrespectful. That's okay. Best thing is ask. Now, when I say ask, I don't mean walk up and be like, hey, yo, you trans? That's not what I'm referring to, okay? But you can very simply ask, what do you prefer pronouns? Or what pronouns do you prefer? Do you prefer she, her? What's your preference? Very simply, that is the best way to find out. Just ask, which pronouns do you prefer? Right? If you accidentally use the wrong pronouns when they inform you, just simply correct yourself. Don't make a big deal of it. Don't freak out. Oh my God, no, just, oh, hey, sorry. Let me use the correct pronouns, and I'll just try to do better. That's it. Okay, just be respectful. It is not okay to ask about surgeries, right? It's not. Anybody's medical information is not your business, and unless you are a personal friend or someone that they decide they're willing to share their information with, then that's not okay. What I've been asked many times is asking about if I've had reassignment surgery, or if I want to, or whatever the case would be. And my counter question to that is, do you realize you just asked me about my genitalia? I don't ask you about yours. You shouldn't be asking about mine. It's not okay to ask about someone's crotch. Okay? It's not your business. Period. It's not, right? It is very rude to ask what a transgender person's dead name is. A dead name is the name like when I was born, my parents named me. That is my dead name. All right. I have my name now, Kristina Manookin. It is rude to ask what that dead name is. It's not relevant what it is. It doesn't matter. No, you don't need to know. Pretty simple. Okay. Do not use phrases such as "when you used to be a XYZ ABC." Those aren't respectful questions. You can say something like, hey, before you started transitioning, how about this? But don't say things like, to me, don't say things like, when you used to be a boy, I was never a boy, okay? I was pre-transition. I was never a boy. It's different. What is the relationship between sexual orientation and gender identity? Well, there isn't one, right? There's no one. It's super simple. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two extremely different things. That's it. What process is required for a transgender service member selected for a urinalysis? Well, All service members, this is directly out of the Transgender Handbook, or UD, all service members must be observed during your urinalysis, right? And you must be tested and observed based on your gender marker in DEERS, all right? So I am a trans woman, all right? I'm a woman, and my gender marker in DEERS is female. So it needs to be a female who watches me, and a female would train. You can't have a male watch me. Now, if there is a female who's not comfortable doing so, there are alternative options. One, you can find a different observer who is comfortable with watching, with observing. Or also, another option is medical personnel. You need your medic, or someone who is a medical person. And that one, the gender doesn't matter, right? It's just medical, because medical is different. They can observe. And that is the best of all worlds, because that's part of their job as medical, is seeing all kinds of bodies. Okay? So they can. Recommendations that I give. Okay. I recommend giving an Army physical fitness test prior to or early in their transition. Reason being is, one, we have to make sure that of course, readiness. First reason is readiness. Making sure that like weapons quals, making sure all these things are up to date is paramount. So if you give that person that PT test right before they start hormones, that can greatly, greatly help. As trans men will start putting on that muscle weight and things like that, they'll start getting stronger and stuff as well. But trans women, I lost a lot of strength, and the first bit of strength I felt I lost was in about 30 days. Right around that 30-day mark, we were like, holy crap, I lost a lot of strength, okay, upper body strength. So I'm glad I took my PT test right before. That really helped me, and it helped the unit stay with readiness. So at no point did I become red on my PT test. Now, yes, a trans person while transitioning must stay in compliance with Army standards according to their gender marker DEERS. During the entire time, yes, I could have passed that PT test, and I made sure that I kept working out. Right? It does get harder. So you can help that entire process by taking that PT test beforehand and giving them that beforehand, so they can transition. I also recommend sitting down with that trans soldier and discussing transition costs and planning, and about how expensive some of these can be. Now, when I say that, I don't mean talk about it to deter someone from transitioning, because you're not going to, right? But talk about it because it's important to have a cost plan, right? For the things that the military might not provide, they may want personally. Then it's important to talk about and find out about the cost of these things for the soldier, and how are they going to have that plan to pay for it. So you don't have a soldier that goes out and gets a bunch of loans and tries to pay for some of these things out of their own pocket or whatnot. It's important to have that discussion about cost, okay? So they can have a realistic plan, right? Talk about standards and discipline, requirements, recommendations, right? So ensuring that they know standards, they hear the standards the entire time. The example I like to use is trans men when it comes to shaving, okay? So there is no regulation for females in the United States Army to shave their faces. There's not. For gender marker in DEERS female, we specify, all right? So if you have a trans man, and while he is taking hormones, he's going to start growing facial hair. Right? Now you want everyone to stay in compliance with regulation. I would just simply sit down with that trans male, that soldier, and talk about it. Like, hey, you're going to start growing facial hair and stuff. Since you're going to have to adhere to the male standards anyways, when it comes to shaving, I recommend you start doing that now. It'll be great practice for you, and they'll also make sure that other soldiers don't look poorly on you because you appear to be subverting the standard, even though your gender marker is maybe female still, and there's no shaving regulation. So I recommend you start following that. And there hasn't been any issue with that. But that's what I do. I have one commander who's talking about potentially having a policy for the soldier that starts to single out that soldier, and that's going to potentially cause you a lot of harm. So as a commander, so just have that discussion. Just talk about it. Most of us trans, well, we just We just want to do our job, fit in, excel at what we excel at, and just be the best soldiers we can. So we're not here to subvert the standard. We're just here to live. Reinforce patience during the transition process is so vitally important. All right, things can take a while. Things are not quick. So you might find it funny if you're like, someone's just going to join the Army, just transition. Okay, and people just join the Army for college. That's 3 years. 3 years to get out. No big deal. And I appreciate their service too. Even if they just joined for college. I appreciate their service. Thank you. Right? As a trans person who joins just to transition, for getting some things paid for, okay, cool. Because the timeline for all these things takes a long time. So the likelihood you'll get 7 to 10 years out of this individual before they've realistically been able to get everything done. Because there's so many waiting periods between things, such as it could be when the diagnosis was part of it for the trans man. Diagnosis taking 6 months to a year or more. From then you have the treatment plan. For some people it's 6 months, some people it's a year they've been unemployable, not by regulation. Also, when it goes to transition, that treatment plan, once my plan was signed, it was still a year before I was even eligible to submit paperwork for reassignment surgery, or any surgeries really. And then there's a waiting list. So, like for SRS, reassignment surgery, the waiting list now for a lot of doctors is like 2 years. So we're just stacking on years and years and years and years and years to get this stuff done. That's not even counting just approval processes, which could add up to a year in itself, just the approval process. So you're going to get 7 to 10 years out of this soldier if they just join a transition. I'm okay with that. Thank you for service. Right? Research all questions before giving any answers and guidance. Open up these manuals. Learn about them. Too many times people say like, well, it's new. I don't know. I mean, it's not new, one thing. And then 2 weeks after the new weapons qual manual came out for the Army weapons qualification for rifle, I was expected to know what the changes are. 2 weeks. We're like 4 years down the road, and there's still people like, I just don't know. If you don't know, look it up. Research, especially if you have soldiers like this, right? Understand the published information on in-service transition. Especially this is especially for commanders. All right, support soldiers, which is great. Absolutely support soldiers, but only support to the extent you are legally able. Okay, that's the important part. Don't try to overdo it. Don't try to sign any ETPs that you don't have the authority to assign. Don't risk yourself or your career. Okay? Just trying to be helpful. So these are the resources I got all this information from. The DOD 1300-28 in-service transition for transgender service members, published on 1 October 2016. Army Directive 2016-35, Army Policy on Military Service of Transgender Soldiers, 7 October 2016. The DOD Transgender Service in the U.S. Military and Implementation Handbook, I referenced several times. It was published on 30 September 2016. The Defense Health Agency Request for Supplemental Health Care Program, published on 13 November 2017. That covers a lot of surgeries and requests and how-to requests. And, of course, the newest one, which is the DTM 19004, Military Service by Transgender Persons and Persons with Gender Dysphoria, which was published on 12 March 2019 and became effective on 12 April. Ooh, excuse me. It's like midnight 30 here. Okay. Other than that pretty much ends the presentation. This is a class. Normally the class goes about an hour because we have about 20 minutes of questions. Usually that happens throughout the entire thing. But if you have questions, please post in the comments below. If you have any clarification that you would like, or if I got something wrong, please let me know. Put it down below, and also cite your source of where I was wrong. Okay. And other than that, then once again, my name is Sergeant First Class Kristina Manookin. and it has been a pleasure.